Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jed and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. Sap, we are just over a week into the season now, by my calculations, week and a half. And we've got some surprising starts. In fact, I think I tweeted this out last night. I think the Western Conference standings are actually hilarious. Like, if you look at them, they made me laugh out loud, just from a basketball perspective. But we wanted to talk about surprising starts. And again, it's a small sample size, but there's some teams that have some very, I think, objectively shocking starts, and in both conferences, Sap. So we'll talk about a bunch of them, but let's say positive and negative. What's jumped out to you at the beginning of the season as a really surprising start, either good or bad?
Well, first positive, I would say that Portland being 4-1 and Utah being 4-1, although I'm sure Danny Ainge isn't pleased to have his Utah Jazz at 4-1. He's in full tank mode, trading off his best pieces in Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell before the season, and trying to maybe get the first overall pick in the draft to get Victor Wembanyama. So I don't think he's happy that they're 4-1, but they are 4-1. Portland being 4-1 is a surprise, but you can kind of see that with Dame Lillard playing at a very high level. So those have been the two biggest surprises from a positive standpoint. From a negative standpoint, it's three marquee franchises that are a combined 2-11. We're talking about the 0-4 Lakers, the 1-4 Philadelphia 76ers, and the 1-3 Brooklyn Nets. I mean, you've got future Hall of Famers up and down those rosters, and there they are, combined 2-11. And watching those teams, the roster construction is poor. I don't know if there's total buy-in from the star players. You got a team like the Lakers that's shooting 22% from three-point range so far this year. Just 4 games, I get it, but 22%. And yet they're taking the 9th most threes per game. So they're not good at shooting threes, but they're jacking up a lot of threes. And look, it's their best player that's been one of the biggest culprits. LeBron James is shooting 26% on three-point shooting. He's averaging 9 3-pointers attempts per game. Lonnie Walker, the fourth, is at 17%. He's averaging 6 per game. And Russell Westbrook shooting at 8%. He's 1 for 12 this year beyond the arc. He's averaging 4 per game. So those 3 players are taking half of their three-point shots, and they're right at 20% in totality. So that's just been a disaster in LA, but Brooklyn and Philadelphia not too far behind.
Absolutely. I mean, LA's got to be the most disappointing team so far, without a doubt. I know expectations other than yours, Sap, weren't sky high for them, but it wasn't 0-4 bad, and it wasn't, like you alluded to with the 3-point percentages, that bad. It's been far worse, and a lot of, I think, Lakers fans were excited that Darvin Ham was going to get in there and be the head coach, and a lot of blame was placed at the feet of Frank Vogel last year. I think people who were taking a real clear look at it were saying, a lot of that wasn't his fault and that the roster construction was poor. I think that, early returns are showing that that's pretty true, that, Frank Vogel wasn't really to blame for all the Lakers' woes last year. And it was mostly roster construction and, the age of the team. And yeah, they got a little bit younger in the offseason, a little bit more athletic, but they didn't get any better at shooting the basketball. And, that's become apparent as they have the worst record in the league with the Orlando Magic, who also have yet to get a win, and the Sacramento Kings. So that's not good company, Sap, to be in the company of the Magic and the Kings historically.
The strangest thing, Jed, is they're playing decent defense. Their defensive rating is 4th in the league. You would think that would translate into some better basketball, but their offensive rating is 30th. Again, when you shoot 22% from 3, and you take as many threes as they do, you're going to be 0-4 at that point. And then, again, the roster construction is pretty poor. Meanwhile, one of the players they traded for Russell Westbrook before the beginning of last year, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, is shooting 50% on three-point shooting with the Denver Nuggets, and he's a nice piece to a team that I think can win the NBA championship. I mean, KCP is a better player than Russell Westbrook straight up, right, at this point in their careers, not to mention that they also gave up on Kyle Kuzma, who's having a nice start in Washington. Montrezl Harrell would be a nice piece to still have as a backup big. And also, they lost a first-round pick that's going to go to Washington. They gave up all of that for Russell Westbrook, who, quite frankly, right now looks like a washed player.
Yeah, and Alex Caruso, another guy that they gave up on,
Right.
who's and the Bulls are off to a solid start, and Caruso plays a big role in that team too. So yeah, they've made bad decisions. It's not just in the guys that they've acquired, but it's the guys they let go too, right, Sap?
Yeah, I mean, can you go all the way back to 2019? And look, I think anybody would have made the Anthony Davis deal, right?
Yes,
But, Brandon Ingram is a two-time All-Star. Brandon Ingram's a really good basketball player. At their peak, Anthony Davis is better. I get that. But Brandon Ingram, Josh Hart, those two pieces, plus all the draft capital that they gave to New Orleans, that would look pretty good right now for the Lakers, wouldn't it? Especially now with the Lakers at 0-4. I don't think they'll end up with the worst record in basketball. They're going to be in the draft lottery, but unfortunately for them, New Orleans can swap picks with the Lakers, and I'm sure they will. If the Lakers are that bad, New Orleans could win the draft lottery, right?
sure.
And that's part of the Anthony Davis deal from 3 years ago. And just picture New Orleans adding Victor Wembanyama to Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram and CJ McCollum. Now you've got a legit title contender for the next half decade. I mean, that obviously might be a bit far-fetched because I think the Lakers at some point will get their act together, but they may not qualify for the playoffs, which would throw them into the draft lottery, which anyone can win. Obviously, New Orleans wouldn't have as much of a chance to win the draft lottery, depending on how the Lakers fare the rest of the season. And again, we're way ahead of ourselves. But you can go back to 2019, at least Brandon Ingram plays 70 games a year, which is about 20 more than Anthony Davis gives you at this point.
Yeah, and he's a much more reliable shooter. So
Right.
Pairing that next to LeBron James. Again, I don't fault the Lakers for making that trade. They did win a championship out of it, and Anthony Davis at the time was head and shoulders a better player, and so I think they made the right move at the time. But yeah, you can certainly look back on it and say what if, and since that they've made a lot of questionable decisions. So I think it's not. I'm surprised that they're 0-4, but I'm not surprised that they're getting off to a slow start. I didn't think it would be this bad. I don't think anybody did. But
you look at the schedule, Jet, at Golden State, at Denver. Okay, you kind of expect those to be losses. I mean, if you're a real contending team, maybe you split those two games, but those are tough places to win, and two teams that I think may meet for the Western Conference Finals, Golden State and Denver. But then you lose at home to Portland, and I know Portland's overachieving right now, but still that's a tough team to lose against. You should be able to beat them. And then you lose to the Clippers. They have trouble with the Clippers. I mean, the Clippers have owned the Lakers the last 5 or 6 years for whatever reason. So, but one win out of 4, is that too much to ask at this point? And again, the Lakers have been a massive disappointment, but you also have to look at Brooklyn and Philadelphia, who we think should be more functional, of being almost as disappointing because those teams aren't much better right now.
Sure. And, Brooklyn and Philadelphia, they're teams that have, especially recently, have had success in the regular season too, especially, the 76ers. Last year, they had the top record in the East for a long time and then faltered a little bit down the stretch. But and Brooklyn was, I believe, Sap, right? Weren't they the 1 seed last year for a long period of time, but until Kevin Durant went down? And so
in January, they were,
regular season success, and they've struggled mightily, and it's not a health issue. When Philadelphia's played poorly, it's been because Joel Embiid's been out. He hasn't been out. And when Brooklyn's played poorly, it's because Kevin Durant or Kyrie Irving's been out. They've been playing. And so Philadelphia, as mentioned, 1-4, Brooklyn 1-3. Ben Simmons has fouled out of 2 of those 4 games already for the Brooklyn Nets. I don't know what's up with that, because we talked about this the other day, Sap. He's historically a not just a good defender, a great defender, and he has not been very good to start. The Nets defense has been terrible, and he's not shooting the basketball. He's shooting the ball on average, I think, about 5 times a game, which is horrible.
And he's got Kyrie Irving yelling at him in the middle of a play to shoot the ball, Ben, and he decided to become Metal Lock Lemon, be in the low post and just kick it out to the perimeter. And I get you giving it up to Durant or Kyrie Irving in those situations, not bad options. But if you're that close to the basket and you're 6'10", 6'11", you can use either hand. You should be attacking the basket. But then again, he doesn't want to go to the free throw line where he's a really poor free throw shooter. Jet, to your point, he has scored a grand total of 21 points in 4 games while committing 18 fouls. So it's just as likely that he commits a foul or scores a point in an NBA game, which is not good. And look, if there's ever a right of rescission on our picks from before the season, I'd like to have one, because I picked Ben Simmons to be Defensive Player of the Year. And right now, he's one of the 5 worst defenders in the league. So I've totally screwed that one up so far.
I've never been a huge Ben Simmons fan. I obviously, he was former number 1 pick, the talent's there. He's played, had some really good seasons, but the more I look at it, and obviously I don't think a Philadelphia fan can look at it from this perspective, but like, I almost feel bad for him at this point. Like, something's clearly wrong. I don't think it's necessarily a health thing. I think it's not, and it's beyond the yips, Sap. Like, with those numbers, like he's something's really wrong. I don't think he's comfortable playing basketball. I never thought he really likes playing basketball. And it seems like it's a situation that hasn't and maybe won't get any better.
Right. I mean, he's a talented guy. He gets paid an extraordinary amount of money to play basketball, but he doesn't love the sport like Kevin Durant does, or LeBron James, or Steph Curry, or Giannis, or all the other, of all the great players in the league. He does it because he's good at it and he can earn a living and lead a very lavish lifestyle. Good for him. They offered him that contract in Philadelphia and he signed it. You just kind of can look back at the Philadelphia 76ers. They had the first overall pick in 2016, and the consensus was to take Ben Simmons, which they did. They could have had Jaylen Brown or Brandon Ingram, which are both better players than Ben Simmons at this point, because at least those guys show up to play, and we tell, those 2 guys love basketball and put the effort in. The following year, remember, the Celtics won the draft lottery and then traded the pick for the 3rd pick. And Philadelphia had the 1st pick. They took Markelle Fultz. They could have had Jason Tatum. So imagine Philadelphia with Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and Joel Embiid. That'd be a pretty powerhouse team. I don't know how it would fit, but, there's a lot of talent there and a lot of buy-in, to say the least. But Fultz and Simmons were the first overall pick in back-to-back years, and it does lead you to believe how good those guys were or weren't in college, because as talented as they were, they couldn't lead their teams to the NCAA tournament, where 68 teams make the tournament. I will guarantee you, if LeBron James went to Ohio State for 1 year, they would have at minimum been a Final Four team. Or probably a national champion. Look, we saw Magic Johnson do it at Michigan State in his 2nd year. Freaking Larry Bird pulled, 4 guys from the local bar to the national championship game. And obviously, Michael Jordan won a national championship as a freshman. Olajuwon played in a championship game on 2 occasions. So, those great players. And I'm not comparing Simmons or Markelle Fultz to any of those guys. But if you're that good, you can't even get your college basketball team into the tournament. That right. To me is a red flag. And at the time, I kind of pushed back on it and said, well, there's not much around them, all of that. But look, 68 teams make it. If you can't make it, how are you the best player in college basketball and the best prospect? I guess we could look back and say that was a telltale sign that maybe these 2 guys just didn't have it.
Yeah, it's certainly, I think it's something that scouts will be looking at more closely now. If players decide to go the college route, and if they don't make the tournament, I think it should raise more questions. Like, you are playing with Division I talent. You're playing with good players, conceivably, not great players, but solid players. And so you should, like you said, at least make the tournament. Bounce to the first round, okay, that happens. That's no big deal. But make the show. That's I don't think that's a huge ask. Sap, in terms of, so we talked about some of these negatives, some of the surprises positive wise, I think there's many. You talked about the Blazers and the Jazz. I think that's especially the Jazz is shocking, because they're intentionally trying to lose. The Blazers are trying to win. They added in the offseason. They have Dame Lillard. They're trying to win. So that's not surprising. The Knicks at 3-1. I'm surprised that they started out so well. The Wizards at 3-1. I'm surprised how well they've started, Sap. So, there's teams that you can point to, even San Antonio 3-2, that should be bad, but are playing above water. Again, very, very early returns. But some of these teams that we thought would be the dregs, the bottom of the league, so far have been competitive to start the year.
Yeah, you look at Washington, you got a nice, I wouldn't call it a big 3, but you got Bradley Beal, Kristaps Porzingis, and Kyle Kuzma. So you've got 3 guys on a given night that can give you 20, 25 points, right? And take some big shots and make some big shots. And, there's some size there with Porzingis and Kuzma at their respective positions. So maybe they're going to be a tough matchup going forward. The Jalen Brunson, Julius Randle combo has worked, like you said in a previous podcast, which is kind of a surprise, but it's working so far. So they're off to a good start. And look, Red Auerbach, who I think probably knew a lot more about basketball than most of us all put together, and then some, always said that the first 10 games and the last 10 games of a season were so important. Getting off to that early start really sets a tone for a team. And maybe that doesn't hold today with, superstars and load management and all of that. But he always felt the first 10 games and the last 10 games were really important. And, it's good for those teams to at least get off to a good start, get the fan base excited, get their players excited, and you start to build a winning culture at that point.
There's some interesting numbers that I was looking at in terms of the points per game, opponents' points per game. The Warriors have the worst defense in the league, and that's something that we think of them as an offensive team, but they've hung their hat on the defensive side, especially in the playoffs, and they have Draymond Green and stuff. They're giving up 124 points a game. They're 2-2, so a little slow to start the season. I was surprised by that, and on the good side of being surprised, the Milwaukee Bucks and Cleveland Cavaliers have both been fantastic on the defensive side. Mm-hmm. The Bucks are the only team that's letting up less than 100 points a game. They're at 97 points a game. That is, in the 2022, to have a defense that's giving up less than 100 points a game is crazy. And the Cavaliers are at 100, are giving up 100 points a game, which is also fantastic. And that's a new, a team with some new guys, with especially Donovan Mitchell. But I think that combo of having Mobley and Jared Allen is very potent in terms of defensively what they want to do. Okoro is a good defender, but again, Milwaukee, I picked Giannis as my I think a lot of people have picked him as a defensive player of the year candidate because he's won it before. But I mean, 97 points per game, giving up just that is ridiculous.
Yeah, he's sensational. I mean, anybody that doesn't think he's the best player in the league is foolish. Is the gap as big as it was for 10, 12 years with LeBron James? Probably not, but right now, he's clearly the best player in the league. Last night, 43 points, 14 rebounds. And, oh, by the way, he's the best defensive player in the league. And he also gets you 6-7 assists. I mean, this is a guy who could easily lead the league in scoring and rebounding and average 6 or 7 assists and be defensive player of the year. Like, you just put that into a blender. How the hell isn't he the best player in the league? You nailed it as far as Cleveland. I'm very high on them. I have them winning the Eastern Conference. They've got a big matchup against the Celtics tomorrow night at TD Garden. It's going to be a fascinating game. Mobley and Jared Allen, I don't think they're as good as Rob Williams as a defender. But when you have two guys like that, they give you a lot of versatility because they can protect the rim, but they can also switch a lot on defense and contest threes, which is such a big part of defense in today's NBA. Those two guys are talented defenders and both can score and rebound as well. Not to mention, we both expect Donovan Mitchell to light it up this year, which he has so far. And then once they get Darius Garland back in, I think they're going to be a wagon this year.
Yeah, they very well might be. And Mitchell, the fit seems seamless so far. So, they're definitely a dangerous team, and they're a young team too. So they should be good have a nice wide open window for them too, Sap. Just looking at a couple more stats before we switch gears here. Other things that have, jumped out at me, De'Aaron Fox, even though the Kings have been awful, are winless to start, averaging 31 points a game. That's pretty impressive and surprising to me. The play of Christian Wood on Dallas has been really surprising too. Right now, Wood's averaging 24 points a game, Sap, and 8, almost 9 rebounds a game. He's been a good find for Dallas, but it hasn't translated into them winning games as well as people would expect.
Yeah, if he could just give Luka some help, be a 20 points per game scorer, help on the boards, at least that gives Dallas someone to help Luka. De'Aaron Fox, probably the fastest guy in the league from end to end with the ball in his hands. I mean, I would think it'd be either him or John Morant. If you put the ball in everybody's hands and went baseline to baseline, those two guys would win that race. So he's a spectacular player. I know they're committed to him long term. At some point he may want out of there if he wants to contend for a championship, make the postseason at some points. And Sacramento hasn't made the postseason in 20 years. So both really, really good players, especially De'Aaron Fox, who to me is an all-star caliber player.
Yeah, he's playing like that this year. And then we have a couple of rookies who are averaging over 20 a game too. Seth Paolo Banchero, your guy, 24 points a game, your Paisan. And yes. Benedict Mathurin for the terrible Indiana Pacers is averaging over 20 points a game as well. So it looks like we got a good rookie class coming in this year. So yes, again, very early returns, but I don't think it's been the start of the season that most people expected, especially if you're a Laker fan, Sap.
No, it's truly amazing, right? Look at the NFL season. Tom Brady's 3-4, Aaron Rodgers is 3-4, and Bill Belichick 3 and 4, right? The two best quarterbacks of the last 10 years, the best coach of the last 20 years. Well, Brady's the best quarterback ever. Obviously, Belichick, we know what a great coach. All three of those teams are 3 and 4. Meanwhile, in the NBA, LeBron, Anthony Davis, Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, Joel Embiid, and James Harden are combined 2 and 11. So, at some point, the old guys kind of peter out a little bit, and it's time for the young dudes to come on and be productive.
Yeah, that's the way of things. That's the way of the world, Sap. But let's switch gears here a little bit and talk about a story that's actually become a national news story, an international news story, you could even say, and that is the Kanye Ye West saga, where he's now started to skew and tweet anti-Semitic stuff, say anti-Semitic stuff, and this is on top of saying some, the White Lives Matter thing, slavery is a choice. It's been a descent into madness for Kanye West. If you haven't been following it, that you can go do that on your own time. But, basically the point is that he's now gone from kind of being like a quirky, crazy artist to saying some just outright anti-Semitic stuff. And the reason that that's trickled into sports, Sap, is because his Donda Sports, his sports agency company run by Antonio Brown for God knows what reason, is now in that crosshairs too. And while Adidas and Balenciaga and a bunch of companies and CAA have dropped Kanye West, people were waiting on Jaylen Brown and Aaron Donald, who were the two, premier clients of Donda Sports, as far as I know, the only two clients of them, waiting for them to see what they were going to do. And it turns out both of them ended up dropping them as their representative. The statement that Jaylen Brown made, he at first was a little bit soft, saying, he could basically I condemn, racism or anti-Semitism in any way, but I'm still going to stick with them as my representative. 24 hours later, that changed. He tweeted out the following statement, Sap. In the past 24 hours, I've been able to reflect and better understand how my previous statements lacked clarity in expressing my stance against recent insensitive public remarks and actions. For that, I apologize, and in this, I seek to be as clear as possible. I've always and will always continue to stand strongly against any anti-Semitism, hate speech, misrepresentation, and oppressive rhetoric of any kind. In light of that, after sharing in conversations, I now recognize that there are times when my voice and my position can't coexist in spaces that don't correspond with my stance or values. And for that reason, I am terminating my association with Donda Sports. I do seek to continue providing mentorship, love, and support to the incredible children, faculty, and young athletes with whom I've been grateful to form bonds and relationships with during my time with Donda Academy. About 24 hours after he tweeted that statement, Sap, Donda Academy closed down. So I don't know if he's going to be able to continue those relationships. Unfortunately, everybody's caught in this Kanye West crossfire who is anywhat associated with him. Aaron Donald tweeted out a very similar statement. But Sap, what's your reaction to all this? You don't have to get into the Kanye West stuff, but more so the Jaylen Brown and the dropping of sponsors.
Well, with Jaylen Brown, who I really like a lot, it's way too late. I mean, this should have happened weeks ago, even before the anti-Semitic rants of Kanye West. I mean, 2 weeks ago was going on about White Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter isn't real. George Floyd was not killed by a police officer. It was more about drug abuse. I mean, just crazy stuff. And Jaylen Brown, go back a little over 2 years ago, was at the forefront among NBA players supporting Black Lives Matter. So at that moment, he should have said, this guy's really a crackpot. I mean, all you need to do is go on Donda Sports and see that Antonio Brown is the CEO of Donda Sports. And it sounds like a story out of The Onion. Like, is this real? Antonio Brown is running Donda Sports for Kanye West. I mean, we're just waiting for Kyrie Irving to join the group and maybe Alex Jones as a consultant. And then you really have, a Mount Rushmore of idiots. So I just think that, and again, wealthy idiots, but now, Kanye West net worth has gone from $5 billion to less than $1 billion because Adidas has broken off ties with him, and his clothing line is plummeting. And you know what? Good, because that's what
breaking
happens
into the Skechers World headquarters yesterday and getting tossed out of it.
Yeah, I mean, the guy obviously is got some issues, or maybe it's just a game he plays, but now it's backfired. But Jaylen Brown should have done this weeks ago. Although, for what we do, it would have been interesting to see Antonio Brown and Kanye West negotiating with Brad Stevens on a contract extension for Jaylen Brown. I mean, that would have been really, really comical to see. Although I think this was more of a marketing type agreement, right, with Donda Sports. I don't know if Kanye West or Antonio Brown or Kyrie Irving or whoever else.
Yeah, but they were technically his agent. I mean, yeah, it does seem like the marketing thing was more important, but.
Yeah, but you have to be licensed to be an agent. I mean, I can't just say, you know what, I'm representing De'Aaron Fox as John Sapichetti. I'm now negotiating. I think you have to be registered with the NBA. Maybe I'm, out of touch with that, but I don't think.
No, I believe you're correct.
Yeah, so I don't think Antonio Brown is registered as an agent with the NBA. If he is,
you have to pass some sort of certification, right? I don't think you'd be able to pass that.
No, I mean, 5 minutes with Antonio Brown, you would put him in a straitjacket. I mean, in Kanye West, the same thing. It's just that these are famous people with money who, when you're famous with money and you act like that, you're now considered eccentric. If I did that, I would be considered crazy. It's just, that's the way the world works. But I wish Jaylen Brown never hooked up with these people, let alone, waited till just a day or two ago to get away from them. I wish he got away from them earlier. But, looking at it from a Celtics standpoint, I would think it's probably good that he's away from Kanye West and Antonio Brown, because I would think that they would put in his head that he has to go to another team where he'd be the number one guy rather than be the number two guy alongside Jason Tatum or behind Jason Tatum. So in terms of getting a long-term deal done with Jaylen Brown, maybe this helps the Celtics cause, although you can always sign for more money with your current team than with the other teams in the league. So if I'm the Celtics, I want to sit down with Jaylen Brown, sooner rather than later, although there's certain rules and ramifications that you have to adhere to and try to get a long-term deal done. Because obviously keeping Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are the two most important things going forward for this franchise.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing about this is that when he initially signed with Donda Sports, it seemed sort of counterintuitive to what we know about Jaylen Brown, and
right.
Being a very thoughtful and insightful person. You're like, what? Why is he throwing his hat in with these people? And the association never really made sense. I never got it. And I agree with you, Sap, that it was late, and there was many opportunities when he should have and could have completely gotten rid of them as his representation. But I will say this, in terms of my life view and philosophy, I never penalize somebody for ultimately coming to the right decision. Mm-hmm. You could say it took them too long, and I think that's fair, and that's fair criticism. But the most important thing at the end of the day is coming to that correct conclusion and doing the right thing. And ultimately he did. And so Adidas too, it was taking them too long. It took them too long. But they made the right and the moral decision ultimately at the end of the day, and that's what matters. And so Jaylen doing that, I don't know that he gets credit for it, but I'm happy that he ultimately made the right decision, and that's what's going to be the most important thing to me at the end of the day. Because, as somebody who is Jewish, not that I practice or anything, but I am. Everything that Kanye West was saying, and I put out a post about this too, is Kanye West for a long time was my favorite artist. I've listened to his music for, since I was basically a freshman in high school. And I've spent countless hours listening to his music. I've been to his concerts, and it's been hard. Right now, it's been hard for me to be able to justify that. Like, I feel like, why am I supporting somebody who actively hates me for no reason? Right. And so it was hard to see Jaylen Brown still associate with that, because Jaylen Brown's a player I really like, not just because he's on the Celtics, but I think, he's a very thoughtful and caring person, and his head's his heart's in the right place with these issues that I agree with too. And so that was confusing for me to see somebody who does seem to have such a good head on his shoulders and be so, in tune with these social issues, be associated with Kanye West. And so I'm glad that that he's done with him, but the initial sort of attraction to him, it leads me to some questions about why he associated with him in the first place, Sap.
Well, obviously, if you're a young guy, and I'm sure Jaylen Brown probably was like you, that he listened to Kanye West's music, looked at his business acumen, which the man is a brilliant marketer, right? And had a net worth of $5-6 billion. if you're a young athlete who makes $20-25 million a year and wants to grow your brand, which Jaylen Brown wants to because he's got his own clothing line and is interested in business, you're going to look to someone who's been successful. And by those accounts, Kanye West has been very successful. But then as it goes deeper and deeper and deeper, maybe you see through everything that obviously he knows how to market himself and make money and all of that, but that maybe he's not a really good person. But no, I'm happy that Jaylen Brown has now disassociated himself with Kanye West and Antonio Brown, and he's not going to be hurting to get representation. I think any representative, any agent would love having Jaylen Brown as a client. First of all, he's going to sign a huge contract at some point. He also is a good guy. I mean, the thing I like about Jaylen Brown, he's my favorite Celtic for many reasons. First of all, he's one of the few players on the team who doesn't constantly bitch and moan about the officials. And that's something that's a turnoff to me with Jason Tatum and Grant Williams and pretty much every player on the team. You know, Jaylen Brown's a guy who just goes out there. If he gets fouled, he doesn't complain all the time. He's also more old school in that he doesn't seem like he wants to be part of the club of all the other young players in the league. He's kind of I wouldn't call him a loner, but I think Jason Tatum is more impressed with, you know, the great players in the league and wants to be friends with Kevin Durant and everyone else. Whereas I think Jaylen Brown, when he's on the court, is all business. And we saw that last year in the finals. You know, he wasn't backing down from Draymond Green, whereas Jason Tatum is more of a laid back guy than Jaylen Brown. Right. Sure. We can just admit that. I mean, they're two totally different guys, but I like that about Jaylen Brown. So I think he's a very appealing player on and off the court. So he's going to have no problem getting representation, getting that big contract, and he can grow his brand without being associated with Kanye West and Antonio Brown.
Yeah, I mean, Jaylen, again, I think why you and I have been drawn to him is because he's been outspoken about some of these issues and has said really smart things. We know he's a really smart guy. You know, he went to Cal Berkeley, which is sort of marching to the beat of your own drum in and of itself, because they're by no means a basketball powerhouse, never have been. Yeah, Jason Kidd went there, but that's about it for their history. And you know, Jason Tatum went to Duke, as most great players do. So, you know, you could see it in college. He was taking graduate level courses at Cal Berkeley, one of the best public schools in the country, one of the best schools in the country. He was the captain of his chess team in high school. So, you know, a different thinker. And Jason Tatum is, you know, more, I don't want to say this in a bad way, but he's, you know, more concerned about, you know, his standing in the NBA and stuff. He seems like a great father. So it seems like he's less concerned about all these things going on in the world, which is perfectly fine. And being a great dad is as important as thinking, you know, about these big issues. That doesn't, it's not anything less than that. It's being a great dad is equally as important as that. So he should feel proud of himself too. But Jaylen Brown is a bit of a different thinker and a bigger thinker. But I would say that associating yourself with Kanye West, again, flies in the face of that, because those two guys, Brown and Kanye, are two of the most selfish people on the planet. And I've never thought of Jaylen Brown as a selfish person. So again, that's why the association was so weird.
No, I just think it's dollar signs, right? I mean, again, you look at Kanye West as a successful businessman. He's going to open up a lot of doors for you. I mean, heck, Jaylen Brown's got that clothing line. You would assume that Kanye West, if he was on good terms with different companies, would be able to push that with anybody right now. I mean, Kanye West, in a sense, and he's got the relationship with Donald Trump. And look, there were athletes. One, obviously, the most high-profile athlete that's friends with Donald Trump was Tom Brady. He had to answer questions. And look, you can be friends with whoever you want, right? I mean, and I think in terms of Tom Brady with Donald Trump, it was a case of they'd been friends for 20 years. I think Donald Trump kind of wanted Tom Brady to, you know, maybe date Ivanka, you know, because he really liked Tom Brady. And look, Donald Trump is into winners, and you know, when you win your 5th and 6th and 7th Super Bowl, that's really going to impress Donald Trump. But I think too that Tom Brady is someone that's interested in real estate, so maybe he wanted to pick the brain of Donald Trump. And Tom Brady doesn't appear to be a real political guy, so look, if he wanted to be friends with the guy, so be it. You know, I'm not going to get all bent out of shape over that. Whereas Kanye West really seems like he went off the rails. And again, he's starting to push back on things that are near and dear to Jaylen Brown. I mean, Black Lives Matters is a hoax. White Lives Matters. He's trying to sell those shirts in stores.
Yeah, slavery is a choice. That's what he said.
Slavery is a choice. Yeah, and you know,
George Floyd. died of fentanyl. Like it's just all
not
stuff
at the
that
knee of a police officer, right? Like all stuff like Jaylen Brown's like, is this a joke? Because 2.5 years ago, who was leading the marches, into Atlanta?
Oh,
in
remember he
Boston?
drove from Boston to
He
Atlanta.
did. And who did the Celtics pick to speak on behalf of Bill Russell on that really touching celebration of Bill Russell on opening night this year? It was Jaylen Brown, and it was a good choice because I think he had a relationship with Bill Russell, and he probably looked at the Bill Russell as much, if not more, as a man, as much as a player and a guy who won 11 championships, right? So I think he's got all those good things going. Look, he's still a young guy. I think he's just turning 26. So, hooking up with Kanye West, and I keep throwing Antonio Brown in there because if you see Antonio Brown involved in something, I'm running away from it, right? Like right away. So, he made a mistake, rectifies that mistake. And again, I think he can move on from here and continue to grow as a player. And more importantly, in this case, as a person.
Yeah. And Sap, listen, it's more important from a personal standpoint that he is disassociating himself with these people because they're bad people and are saying, ridiculous things and hurtful things. But it's also, from a business standpoint, now they're pariahs. There was no businesses that Jaylen Brown was going to be able to get into or market himself with who wanted to touch the Kanye brand anymore,
No.
So he almost, from just a pure dollars and cents thing, him and Aaron Donald had to, because no one's going to say, yeah, I want to work with that agency right now. It's terrible for all their brands. So again, it was twofold, I think, too, in that I hope that the decision was a moral one, but also you can't factor out that there was clearly a business reason for this too, because at this point, being associated with Antonio Brown or Kanye West is going to cost you money, not make you money.
Exactly. Yeah. Good riddance on twofolds.
So we're going to wrap up here, Sap. Next week, we're going to talk a little bit, because we ran out of time here, talking about the NBA tanking and what you can do to combat it, and some ideas that Adam Silver, the commissioner of the league, had, possibly relegation, which they do in the Premier League and most of the soccer leagues out in Europe. Talk about that. Talk about any other stories that come up, and maybe the Lakers will get a win by the next time we come back, Sap.
Yeah, there's a chance. Yeah, there's a chance. Maybe they'll hit their threes one night, and they'll all be good in Lakerland.
Yeah, maybe Westbrook will come back and start being a really good 3-point shooter. That could happen too.
Well, he's 1 for 12 this year. He only has one way to go, and it's up.
That's true. Well, Grant Williams started terrible from 3 in his career, and now he's a very good 3-point shooter. So follow that trajectory.
Yeah, there you go. I'm glad you're so positive.
You go. Somebody's got to be. All right, Sap. Well, that's it for us here at the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. Thanks to Full Press Coverage. Make sure you check out our social medias at JohnSap25, at Jet Stryer. You can find the YouTube version of this podcast at youtube.com/Jet Stryer, or just find the regular podcast wherever podcasts are found. Just search the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. We will talk to you later, everybody. Thanks for listening. See ya.